My name's Jamie Lee, and today I'll be doing a review of Guardians of the Galaxy 3. If you know me, you would know I love the Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians 1 is my second favorite Marvel movie, Guardians 2 was fantastic, and James Gunn hyped 3 up to be the next best thing to Endgame, and that it would be the closing chapter, like the final chapter of the Guardians family as we know them. So I went into this movie expecting to be completely sad, expecting to have my heart broken, which is why I took tissues, kind of predicted that there would be deaths in this. I really thought the way that Bautista spoke about his character in the last few years, that it would be Drax, Kraglin might go, Peter would go off on a solo mission, and Rocket would take over and lead the galaxy, or lead the Guardians, into the next phase of the MCU way later down the track, but still that Rocket would be the leader. So I expected this movie to be extremely upsetting and completely break my heart by the end of it. But when I left, I felt so satisfied and I was so happy with the ending and the closing chapter of the Guardians of the freaking Galaxy, as Rocket would say. It was so perfect. So I'm going to tell you why and what I liked about it. The writing in this movie was amazing. James Gunn always has a way to make jokes land, with me anyway. His comedic timing is perfectly balanced. Like, you can have this emotional scene happening and tears coming down your face, and he will throw in a joke that lands, and you're like chuckling or laughing while still crying and being, you never lose that emotional state of mind. You're still invested in that moment and nothing is taken away from that emotional scene, but you can still get a laugh out of it. Like, it's still funny what can be thrown in or what can be said. And I just think that's such clever writing. And that's very consistent with all the Guardians movies, if you ask me. The jokes never feel overdone. They never feel like they're forcing you to laugh. They just seem to be so natural, whether that's the writing or whether that's the personalities of the jokesters like, Pratt, Bradley Cooper. I'm not sure, but all the jokes for me just seem to land, and they're so appropriate the way that they're placed. Like, they just fit. I mentioned the writing being amazing and then only talked about the jokes, but that's a minor thing for most people, but it's a major thing for me. I really like getting a good laugh out of these movies, but the plot itself was also really well written. I think it's really difficult to introduce so many new faces into a new movie, and James Gunn did a really good job at ensuring that everybody got equal screen time, whether it was characters that were introduced for this movie purely, or characters that we're going to see further in the MCU, the villain, the Guardians as we know them. I feel like everybody got equal amount of screen time. Like, everything was balanced as it should be. That's the Thanos quote. Sorry. Anyway, people would argue that Adam Warlock didn't get much screen time, but I feel like he was introduced really well. At the end of the day, we want to close the chapter on the Guardians, and we are going to see Adam Warlock in future projects. So an introduction to him is really all that we needed, and that's exactly what we got. We got a little bit of history. We know that he was awoken from his cocoon early, therefore he's a little bit babyish, a little bit immature still, and that was enough for me. Likewise with High Evolutionary, I knew everything I needed to know about him, from the animal torture and cruelty, and then from 2 conversations in the movie. That's all I needed to know who this guy was and what he was about. And those conversations were when he went frantically running into Rocket's cage, and he was erratic and just ranting, how did you know about the chamber? And that scene right there, that was one of my favorite scenes, because I could feel that he was happy that he got the answer. He was jealous that Rocket knew. He was curious about how his brain works and how he could better his own and get this information and get this knowledge. How did Rocket know this? Like, I could feel what he was feeling purely from that scene alone. So that was an epic scene. I thought that was really good. And then the conversation that he had with Peter, and he was talking about Counter Earth, and Peter said, this isn't a better Earth. A better Earth doesn't have, crackheads selling meth to kids in alleyways. And High Evolutionary responded with, no, it's not, which is why I'm going to erase it and start all over. And that told me his intentions, exactly what he wants. He wants to make this perfect world. So yeah, I feel like everybody got enough screen time. We knew enough about the villains. Let's move on to the characters that we know and we love and that we want to say goodbye to. Now, we all know that Peter was the leader of the group, but the shine really wasn't on him in this movie as much. He still got a really good arc though. Like, he felt anxiety over the stress and worry about, his best friend dying, or second best friend, should I say, according to Drax. He felt guilty that he was drunk instead of being, his usual self in order to protect his family and, fight for the city. And he was grieving Gamora as we knew her. Like, he came full circle by the end of this movie to accept that this is not the Gamora that he knew. She will never be the Gamora that he wants. And that he just has to accept this new reality. And that was upsetting as well, that things are not always going to stay the same. And it was just very upsetting to see him have to move on and to accept him moving on. It was quite sad. Speaking of sad, they got me good. I told you before I was predicting who would die, and that scene where, Starlord was out for the count, I was a mess. And I just kept looking at my husband and I was shaking my head no, they do not have the balls to do this. I'm sorry, they don't. They can't do this. I was crying, and obviously I was like, maybe they can. I was really anxious, I'm not gonna lie, but I just thought, no way. And thankfully, phew, he didn't die. But yeah, they did have me on the edge of my seat. So that was a really emotional thing for Starlord in this movie as well. Next up was Rocket, and seeing his pain and his past was truly heartbreaking. I don't think there was a dry eye in the cinema. It was so sad. Not only did he suffer physical torture and abuse, but even the emotional abuse that he suffered was so upsetting. He was told that he was an abomination, just a lab rat, this test subject. He was made to feel like he was worthless and alone until he found friends in Lila and Floor and Teeths. It was so beautiful that he found friends. And I just got emotional by the end of it because I thought, he's found friends in these people. And oh my gosh, when they were talking about seeing the sky, I lost it. That was so emotional, that scene. But anyway, I was also emotional at the part when, thinking that they were his friends, but in the Guardians, he found a family, and he always talked about that. So that was really emotional to me that, he's not alone. I just felt like I want to give him a hug, and oh, it was so beautiful. And what was really amazing with the writing was the fact that he got to reunite with those friends. He never got that closure of saying goodbye to them. So seeing them up in the afterlife, wherever that may be, and them saying that they saw the sky, and that they were happy, that was so, oh my gosh, I get goosebumps just thinking about it now. That was really great. But for Rocket to then go back to Earth and achieve what he tried to achieve all those years ago by rescuing these lab rats and these test subjects from the High Evolutionary was just perfect. He was the hero in his own story, and I just feel like his arc, his story, the plot of that whole thing was just so perfectly written. And yeah, I was really happy to watch it. Even though I was crying, I was really, really happy in my heart. My next favorite character in this movie, surprisingly, was Drax. Drax is usually there for comedic relief. He's this big, strong guy that makes you laugh every now and again. But in this movie, I feel like he was just better. He communicated with the kids. He could speak their language. He seemed funnier. Some of the jokes that he was making were a bit more fluent. I loved the one where he was on the couch and he's like, well, why is it oblong? And he just kept trying to lie down on the couch. And Starlord said, Drax, I see you. And it just threw me back to Drax being that invisible man. You can't see me, I'm invisible. So I don't know if that was a callback or not, but it threw me back to that moment, which made me happy. And then there was a moment where Nebula said, and I love moments like this, there was a moment with Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange in Multiverse of Madness, and moments about parenting, and when parenting gets quoted in such a beautiful way in these movies, I feel like that's so relatable, and that makes me a ton times happier than any joke ever would. And they did, Nebula did that with Drax. She said to him, you weren't made to be Drax the Destroyer. Your purpose is not to be Drax the Destroyer. Your purpose was to be a dad. And he can now lead these kids that he's so easily could communicate and make these kids happy. And again, that made my heart sad. I looked over and I was like, oh, So good. Okay, let's move on to the cinematography. The Guardians always have a sick soundtrack. The songs are where they should be. The music just sets the mood. Everything just flows, and this movie is no different. If you know me, you know that I love and appreciate a good callback to other movies or different times, and this movie gives us just that with the soundtrack. Come and Get Your Love is played when we first are introduced to adult Peter, at least, and he's dancing his way on in, trying to get that bounty, and we get that epic scene of
Starlord. Who? Starlord, man. Legendary outlaw.
So good. And then that song comes on again in this movie, and I just can't explain how good of a feeling that is. Like, it really makes my heart feel full, and I get goosebumps just hearing it. Like, when I heard that, I was like, oh yes, so good. Likewise with the soundtracks, the visuals in Guardians movies are usually really good in my opinion. They always look great. But this movie went to a different level. Like, it's visually stunning. One of my favorite shots is of Peter. The camera angle pans up and you see him standing in the ship just looking out. And then it turns around and we get the back view of that. So we see what he's looking at, and it's just space, and it's absolutely beautiful. You see a little bit of it in the trailer, but in the movie itself, it's such a beautiful shot. And then I really love the flashback scenes and how they transition between present time and the flashbacks, and also that younger Rocket compared to the Rocket that we know today. Transitioning between those two was just so smooth. The ships looked amazing. That Ravenger's ship with the skull, that looks so goddamn cool. And then Peter's ship, when they landed on Counter Earth, the bright colors and just the way it crash landed, it was so slick. It just looked so great. Their suits looked amazing. And then the choreography in that fight scene in the hallway where everybody was fighting these creatures was just amazing. That was one of the greatest fight scenes that I have ever watched. Everybody was teaming up together. Everybody had really cool kills, really creative ways to kill these guys, and it was so fun to watch. I had so much fun with that scene. Another scene that made me happy, which I thought had a lot of heart, is when Yondu was giving Kraglin that inspirational speech about how to whistle to use the arrow. And he said something along the lines of, "You've got this, boy." And it just took me back to, Guardians 2, when he was saying to Peter that, "I may not be your father, but I'll always be your daddy." And I just had goosebumps with that. And the fact that he always called them boy, it was just so fitting and so wholesome to see him back in there. I really felt like we really are closing this chapter, guys, and that felt really nice as well. Okay, so I think I will leave it there because I feel like I am just gushing over all these callbacks now, and that's probably going to get annoying if you're not a Marvel fan, but I will rewatch this movie and I will turn these callbacks into shorts of, moments that I really enjoyed, or little things that, I really appreciated that threw me back to different times over the past 3 movies. So I'll definitely do something like that. But I loved this movie. I've loved this franchise, and to me, this was the perfect ending that they could have given me. If I'm being honest, as a Marvel fan, I've been a little bit let down with the movies and mainly TV shows that they've put out lately, specifically She-Hulk, Thor Love and Thunder. These movies insulted me a little bit, if I'm being honest with you. Like, I've given my money, my time, my tears to these movies, and I don't feel like I got rewarded or even appreciated for that. Like, I feel like Thor Love and Thunder specifically was just wasteful to me. So to see them finally on the right track with this movie, or the way that Marvel is heading at least, I felt like this was on the right track, and I have total faith now in James Gunn over at DC and whatever path Marvel are choosing to take with the MCU at the moment. I'm pretty satisfied with where those two paths are going to go. And yeah, I really enjoyed this movie, and I can't wait to see what they produce in the future, either of them, James Gunn and also Marvel as a brand as well. So yeah, let me know in the comment section what you thought of this movie. Let me know who you predicted to die, because I'm sure I can't be the only person that thought people were going to go in this movie. Very glad that they didn't. Super, super happy that nobody died in this. I got to say, I'm really, really grateful for that. As I said, completely satisfied and whole with the ending. So no complaints from me. Let me know what you thought in the comments section. And if you could you please like this video? And if you're not already, please subscribe to my channel, and then head on over to my Instagram and give me a follow over there as well, please. Okay, sweet as. Have a good day. Bye.